All right, so now we're going to get into completely solving a quadratic by completing the square. Yesterday we just did the introduction part. Previous video just went over how to finish it off. Now we're going to just put it all together, the entire process. Remembering back again that there are 3 ways to find the solutions to a quadratic, factoring being the first one, but remember, it doesn't always work. That's why we need another method. One we haven't learned yet is quadratic formula, which always works, but you must memorize this formula. And the last method, which we are currently working on, is completing the square, which also always works. All right, let's go ahead and start the first example where we're going to go all the way through from start to end. So same as yesterday, we start by completing our square. Always starting with our 12, we're divided by 2, which gives us 6, and 6 times 6 is 36 because we squared it. Or you can set it up in the x factor and see it happening there. So then we're going to write x squared plus 12x, add 36 to complete the square, but what you add on the left, you add on the right. And then we factor this using our shortcut. We get a set of perfect squares, so x plus 6, x plus 6. I'm skipping that step where I write it twice. 45 comes from combining 9 and 36 on the right side. All right, then we move on by solving this when we square root both sides. Again, we're not done here at this point. Now we're going to do what we just went over today, which is square root the left side, square root the right side, introduce our plus minus, the x squared and the x, and the square root and the x squared cancel. We're left with x plus 6 equals plus or minus, square root of 45 is 9 times 5, so it's 3 radical 5. We're going to move that 6 over by subtracting it over. And again, if you can subtract over in your head and not write this minus 6 step, feel free to do that. Now the answer has a radical in it, so we cannot actually subtract these unless we use that calculator. So we are going to leave our answer as is. So final answer is negative 6 plus or minus 3 square root of 5. Now again, looking at our answer, that's why we couldn't solve this originally by factoring. We had to use completing the square. All right, let's move on to the next example of 3. Here's number 2. We're going to start off the same way, complete the square. Take 16, divided by 2, we get negative 8. Negative 8 squared gives us positive 64. So 64 completes my square, or you can do the x factor and see it happening. Add it to both sides. Factor x minus 8 times x minus 8 using the shortcut, or just put x minus 8 to the power of 2. 77 comes from the right side, 13 plus 64. Now to go ahead, we're not done yet, so we're going to keep on going by adding the square root to both sides. That's not what I want. I'll use this one. Don't forget the plus minus here. Squares and square roots cancel, so these are gone, and we're left with x minus 8 alone, plus or minus the square root of 77. Now I'm going to simplify the square root of 77, but the only thing that goes into 77 is 7 times 11, besides 1 times 77, which neither one of these is going to help me simplify square root of 77. So this one we actually don't even have to simplify it. We're just going to move that 8 over at this point. We'll not combine unless we use a calculator. So we're left with positive 8 plus or minus the square root of 77 as our final answer. Let's move on to the last example that I'll be going over with you, and then you'll be trying the last 2. So take my 7 and divide it by 2. That's 3.5. So because it's an odd number, and that's the wrong number there, because this is an odd number, I'm going to be leaving it as a fraction instead of using decimal. So this is going to be positive 7. I'm going to divide it by 2, so it's going to be 7 halves. 7 over 2, just leave it as a fraction. And I'm going to square it. 7 times 7 is 49 for the numerator. 2 times 2 is 4. Side note, that bottom number will always be a 4 because you're always dividing by 2 and you're always squaring it. So I'm going to go ahead and factor this. X squared plus 7x. I'm going to be adding that 49 to both sides. 49 over 4 to both sides. And then I'm going to factor the left side, so left side factors with a perfect square trinomial using the 7 over 2. So I'm going to use x plus 7 over 2 equals, and then we're going to add those up Now, because it's a whole number and a fraction, I gotta go back to my basic skills in elementary and how do we add fractions. We're gonna get common denominators. So in this case, I'm just gonna do the work on the side. We know it's 14 plus 49 over 4. I'm gonna make 14 into a fraction by dividing by 1. I'm gonna make my denominator that's common so I can add these. I'm gonna multiply the left side by 4 so we can have a denominator of 4. But if I change the bottom of the fraction, I need to change the top the same way. And then we just go ahead and multiply 14 times 4. That's going to be, I believe, 56, 4, 16, yeah, 56 over 4 plus 49 over 4. If we add these together, we're going to get 105 over 4. And then that's the number I'm going to put over here, 105 over 4. And that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. So we put our square root on both sides, just as we did on the previous problems, which will cancel the power of 2. Don't forget the plus minus. These are gone. We're left with x plus 7 over 2 equal to the square root of 105 with the plus minus, but the 4 becomes a perfect 2, so we now have at least a common denominator on those fractions. I'm going to move the 7 to the other side. I'm just going to make it negative. Plus or minus square root of 105 over 2. That's my final answer. Go ahead and try the next two problems on your own and see what you get. Pause the video. Come back to it when you're ready to see the answers. All right, so your answers for the two problems, you should have gotten x, keep doing that, x equals -9 or x equals 3. So this one would have given you a perfect squared when you added the 9 to both sides, which would have given you the square root of 36. So you're not getting the right answer. If you had this part, you should have gotten this right here, 9, I'm sorry, wrong one, 27 plus 9, which would have become a 36, which is a perfect square. So this should have become a 6 when you square root at both sides. And then just subtract the 3 over, which gives you that -9. All right, on the other one, you should have gotten the following answer. X equals to 5 plus or minus the square root of 4 square root of 2. If you got 2 square root of 8, instead, that means you should have used the 16 times 2 instead of 4 times 8 when you simplified the square root. All right, go ahead and start your practice.